Welcome to Digestible Discourse, a political podcast where SAC students debate topics in today's polarizing atmosphere. I'm Monica Inouye, and from left to right, your commentators are...
My name is Greg Arias. I'm a SAC student. I'm majoring in theater education and poli-sci, and I am your left commentator.
And I'm Jesse Espitia. I am a sophomore at Mount SAC and a journalism major, and I am here to give you my opinions on what's going on in today's world of politics.
I'm Isaac Lee. I'm a freshman at Mount SAC. I'm a communications major, and I am a moderate commentator.
I'm Katie Pretty, and I am majoring in political science and journalism, and I will be speaking as a conservative.
Okay, let's get started. This summer's nationwide protests in response to the killing of George Floyd has shed light on the maltreatment of Black Americans by law enforcement. Various surveys showed that there was an increase in favorability of the Black Lives Matter protests among adults, though that poll is slowly decreasing over time. These protests have illuminated what groups of people are prone to maltreatment, poverty, and incarceration in America, and there have been calls to defund the police across the nation. Others fear that a lack of law enforcement will result in further chaos. So with that, let's start this conversation about social injustice. Greg?
Thank you, Monica. So my perspective of all this is, especially when it comes to our current issue of today, which is there is systemic racism in our country. There's no doubt about it. We have experienced it 400 years ago, and we're experiencing it now. And the only way to truly deal with this problem, especially when it comes to law enforcement, is to defund the police. Now, when it comes to defunding the police, I don't mean take away local law enforcement. No, but our police officers are not mental health experts. They are not educators. And they're also just not properly trained. So by defunding the police, you're taking away responsibilities that they don't need to handle and allocating those funds to our education, to our healthcare system, to mental health services, to resources that have been defunded for years. So doing that, it's also helping with their training. Now, why is it that someone who has to study law for about 2.5 years and pass a bar exam to practice law, but 6 months for someone to enforce it? That's another problem. So by that, I'm going to say, in order to fix the problem that we have, which is systemic racism, we need to defund the police and we need to fix our social justice system.
Okay, Katie, do you want to give your response to what Greg said about specifically defunding the police and shifting funds, lawyers spending 2 years to pass a bar, whereas cops don't spend as much time?
So basically, as far as social injustice goes, I think there are definitely many ways to approach the topic. And I think through the Black Lives Matter organizations, it is interesting to see the push to defund police. There are a lot of consequences that would come with that. There was one student who had interviewed the LAPD, and they did say the night before they had previously had a case where they were just having back-to-back homicides in places that there were defunding of the defunding of police, and where that was pushed. In, for example, Chicago, I believe in New York City as well, there was a rise in homicides in that time in comparison to last year's numbers. So I do think that there is going to be an increase in violent crimes, as there is no punishment, or there will be a less of a chance, I guess, of punishment or being caught, as police will be very busy with what they do have for the task at hand. And I feel like in regards to social justice and the way that that's being handled through the Black Lives Matter organizations, I think as a conservative, that would concern me a lot as far as how that's being handled, because I think everyone can agree that Black Lives Matter. Everyone can agree that we want justice in the cases that need justice. But I do think as far as Black Lives Matter as an organization, I do see things on their about pages for each different chapter. There are things that I wouldn't agree with. For example, they're anti-capitalism. They have on their about pages like dismantling, I guess, patriarchy. I don't have the exact quotes, but I do know that these are on their about pages. Of quite a few of them do include globalism. There was a post from Black Lives Matter that did like praise Fidel Castro when he died and saying how we needed to remember him as an important political figure and like a good leader. And so I think as far as how social injustice is being handled, I think the way that things are being approached right now are not entirely correct. And I would not be able to back that, seeing as all the things that they're kind of meshing in with their police brutality claims of it being systemically racist.
Now, me personally, I find it shocking that you say claims, because really the police forces in America have shown across these different incidents through many years that there is a racist problem within our law enforcement agencies across the country. Now, there's video evidence of recent events that you can see. I don't even need to cite the names or the incidents of different situations and scenarios that are handled by these police officers in very poor fashion when it comes to policing African American and people of minorities. And when you see them handling these altercations with maybe white individuals, you see that their actions that they take are a bit more calculated and they're more careful to not break the law. Now, I understand there are white Americans that are murdered by the police, and nobody is saying that that does not occur. But what that should highlight to everybody is that we have a problem with the police murdering our citizens, regardless of the color. And I feel like that should be something that our country should be unifying against, really, because African Americans, minorities, regardless of what box we check, we are all Americans and we don't deserve to be murdered in cold blood, regardless of what our criminal past may be. As Greg mentioned, these police officers are not trained in mental health issues, but they're also not legally entitled to be judge, jury, and executioner. There is a charge known as resisting arrest. Okay, that is not a reason to murder somebody because they were not, quote unquote, complying. So resisting arrest does not qualify a death sentence. And unfortunately, that's what a lot of people from African American communities experience in their own communities. So I really do think that there is a serious problem, and I'm glad that our country and really a lot of white America, I would say, is now waking up and realizing these issues that are at hand. And our country is in a very tumultuous time, I would say.
Yeah, I want to pick up on that and go to how we handle these problems. And I think Greg made a good point about the defunding the police movement, but I do think like at the end of the day, like you're always going to have some wacky people. You're always going to have like some people who are genuinely bad or genuinely cannot get help from things like mental services, like better education. So while we should be taking preventative measures to like help the police never get into situations where they have to kill someone just to de-escalate a crime, I think that at the same time, we actually should allocate more funding to police so that they have a better understanding of the means necessary to handle mental health crises as they come. Because again, like I don't think that the preventative safety net of allocating funds to mental health and education are going to solve like everything. But I think at the end of the day, when things do go wrong, people almost always will call the police.
So you're saying that to fix the problem is to allocate more funds to the police department. You want to know what they're already doing with that money already? The common cop is now being dressed up as a soldier. They're wearing military gear and using military weapons for local law enforcement on civilians. That's what they're using the current money. And also, you mentioned how allocating more funding to education and mental health services won't fix anything, when in fact, those services are lacked in communities of color and very poor communities. They lack education, they lack mental health services, they lack all of those funds that somehow the suburbs and the white areas have, and they don't have that problem. And to that point, I don't understand how that could solve the issue.
So I do want to ask, is everyone like aware of how many unarmed Black people who were not resisting arrest or trying to flee the scene? Does anyone know how many of those people were killed by cops in 2019? So the actual number is just there was one Black person who had no weapon and was not fleeing the scene that was killed by a cop. This person was also charged, so there was justice in the situation. I do understand fighting for those types of injustices, and despite no protest, despite there being like nothing really major in the media about it, there was justice. So I don't think that there's as much injustice going on as people expect. But unfortunately, there were 48 police officers that were killed last year while on duty, whether they were just conducting traffic violations or real like violent situations and investigations, I guess. So I do think that there is quite a bit of bias and like uninformed people when they're making the comments to defund police for reasons that there's a systemic racism, when there's not actually it's not as big of a problem. This person did get justice that this did happen to last year, and I do think it's interesting to note that there wasn't anything major now or anything major then when we heard about it.
Trayvon Martin was unarmed.
I was talking about, wait, I'm confused as to why you brought.
Well, because you're saying that this person who was unarmed received justice, but there are other cases of people who were unarmed.
Well, I was saying
and still getting shot.
So he's talking about the Trayvon Martin case where George Zimmerman ended up not being charged. It was a really high-profile trial, I think, in 2012. So I want to ask Katie something before I ask Greg something really quick. So, Katie, what do you think about? There are people that say cops get into this job, knowing the risks of safety, of them possibly getting shot on the job. This is the job that they signed up for. Whereas these, innocent, unarmed Black people, this was unexpected. They were just probably going about their day. They didn't plan on being stopped or something like that. So what do you say about cases like that for the police?
Okay, so like I said before, this issue is not branched out as far as I think people are like saying that it is. For example, let's say the George Floyd thing, what kind of started and triggered everything. So he was on drugs. The body cam footage was released where he was saying he couldn't breathe while he was still standing up. They tried to have him sitting in the cop car. And they kept saying like we'll open the windows and such for him, and he was saying he couldn't breathe at that point in time. And this is what has been kind of pushed all over the place, that this is how officers.
So you're saying when someone has a knee on their neck, they could breathe?
No, that's not at all what I was saying. Before then, he was already saying he could not breathe. Even I believe the autopsy reports showed that he was overdosing on drugs during that time. He was claiming way before that he could not breathe. And I do think also there were other people in the car, and I think if it was anything like race, like the car that George Floyd was taken out of, if there was anything like racially motivated there, I think they would have done something to all the other Black people that were in the car with him. But it was just this one person who had the police like called on him. This case specifically too was pushed a lot larger with very little context. And so I think that can definitely be the case in a lot of other situations. As none of us are police officers here, we can't really, it's hard for us to say, not having been there, not having all these other things. But I do think that there's a narrative being pushed that may not even necessarily be evident at all. And I think going off of that, I think as far as people are speaking on training and such of the police officers, I do think obviously there are going to be bad cops. We can't say everyone in the United States is absolutely perfect. That's not at all the argument that I would make. But I do think it would be important to note that police unions, where officers are protected, I think the same thing can go for like teachers unions. A teacher can be an absolutely horrible teacher, but as long as they're protected by a union, that will be okay. And I think that rather than defunding the police, maybe take a look at police unions and how those are functioning.
Well, I just really, find it shocking to hear you say something like that, because really, if George Floyd was saying, "I can't breathe," prior to him being forced to the ground with a knee on his neck, I really don't understand how a logical person could then place their knee on somebody's neck that's already saying that they can't breathe. Why would you restrict their breathing even more? And that's why I don't agree with what Isaac said earlier about throwing more money at the problem isn't going to solve anything. I really don't know how money can really influence somebody's judge of just common sense. I really don't know why money would solve a bad cop. It's not going to. What is going to solve it is the good cops turning in the bad cops. But unfortunately, that seems to be frowned upon, and police officers are often subjected as whistleblowers. I know we just recently had a shooting here in Los Angeles, which has been very high profile in the Compton Sheriff Station, which I'm sure we're all aware of. Now, I'm not saying that the officers involved were part of this, but I do know in the past that the Compton Sheriff Station, they've allegedly had officers involved in a police-style gang that gets tattoos on their body after they murder somebody, obviously a civilian. And once they get that murder or that kill, they then get tattoos on them. And that seems to be the culture that seems to be permeating throughout police stations and police departments across the country, especially when they're influenced by our president at the highest level. He basically spoke out against the Portland supposed alleged Antifa member who was murdered by U.S. Marshals. And what our president said was that it was retribution for the person that he killed, who was one of his supporters. So when police officers are hearing this type of rhetoric from the highest level, it really does not bear well for citizens as far as what our future is looking like in America with policing. And that's why when we say defund the police, we're not saying to get rid of police, but there are hundreds of thousands of untested rape kits in America, and murders and rapes that have gone unsolved. And that's why really that's maybe where our funds should be allocated, because really we have a real problem in America, and it does not come down to throwing more money at the police. That's not going to resolve our issues here.
So I 100% agree with Jesse just said, especially going back to when Katie, I'm sorry, but it sounded like you were trying to justify those cops' actions when it came to George Floyd. No matter if you are guilty or under drugs, no one deserves to get their knee on your neck. That's just no. And even if he was guilty, he doesn't deserve to be murdered because, again, like what Jesse said, they are not the judge, they are not the jury, and they're not the executioner. They are to enforce the law, and that's it, and let the system do the work. But we can't, because we have people like these police officers who take matters in their own hands. And going further on to doing matters on their own hands, it's not acceptable for protesters to riot, but it's okay, and to take matters in their own hands, but it's okay for a 17-year-old to illegally cross state lines with a weapon that he is, again, not of age to carry, and take matters in his own hand and protect property while being praised by local law enforcement. They even offered him water, they offered him support, they were happy to see him. So how can you say add more funding to the problem and justify their actions?
So as far as the whole George Floyd thing, I never said it was okay to kneel on someone's neck. That was never something that was implied a lot, not anything I said. As far as the toxology report, he did have fentanyl in his system, and they said it is a combination of factors. And so these cops, okay, although kneeling on the neck is not something they're trained to do, you can't say that they killed him because of that. That wasn't even the first thing they did. I'm not sure if any of you guys watched the body cam footage. They put him in the back of the car first, but he didn't want to go in the car. They tried to do a bunch of other things before getting to that point. They did not force him out of the car and force him onto the floor. That was not the case. There were multiple times when they tried to help him, and he was saying like, I can't breathe, and they were like, well, we'll open the windows for you. They were trying to work with him. I'm not saying kneel on his neck, but they were trying to work with him. So automatically just assuming that they went straight from there to there that's not even the correct story. And then there are many videos of Kyle Rittenhouse over there, and he never at one point did he shoot until he was directly attacked. Until people had directly jumped on him, he had the gun with him the entire time. I think if his goal was to kill people, he would have just shot immediately, but that was not until he fell on the floor. He tripped while he was running away from these people that were chasing him, and he did shoot back at them. I do think it's a really upsetting situation, the fact that a 17-year-old felt that he needed to take the matter into his own hands of protecting buildings because he didn't trust that.
Katie, that's called vigilante justice, and it's illegal. Taking matters in your own hands. And I am calling out rioters on that, yeah, because that's a form of vigilante justice, but so is Kyle Rittenhouse, and it's at an extreme level. He went out there to kill people. You don't go out with a rifle without the intention of killing people.
I also think that you don't attack someone with a rifle. If I knew someone had a weapon on them, I wouldn't go up to them and start hitting them because I don't want.
They were trying to disarm him. They weren't trying to hit him.
Someone hit him with his skateboard. And then he was running away from them. He had not shot anybody at that point. He was not just aimlessly shooting people. The only people that he did anything to were the people who directly grabbed him. He did not harm anyone.
To disarm him.
But
that was the goal. Their goal wasn't to attack him. Their goal was to disarm him.
They did hit him though, and he had fallen to the ground. I don't think he didn't hurt anyone at that point.
He had already murdered somebody.
When did he
shot somebody in the head, and that is the reason why he was running.
But that was after they were already attacking him. He had not done anything at that point.
Katie, that's not true.
And this is all alleged, of course, but just based off of the footage and the reports, he had murdered somebody and was running down the street after shooting somebody in the head.
And he had passed 4 police vehicles while people in the background were saying he shot 2 people. And police officers did nothing. It wasn't until 24 hours later when he was arrested.
I have also heard reports that he did try to turn himself in at that point in time. So I think obviously there are a lot of, because of how recent it is, there is a lot of information that has not been confirmed by everyone yet.
Well, it wasn't recent. It was 3 weeks ago, and they've already charged him to first-degree intention of murder, which is actually kind of hard because you can't say, because of the mixed narrative that people are saying that he went there to protect property. It's now hard to even charge him with that high degree, and they did that on purpose.
Like, how can you say that that's not what he was there for? I also would like everyone to address, I'm not sure if you've had any rioters or protesting happening in your area, but right down the street from my house, there was attempted looting at a store. They did break the gates, but luckily there was security on the other side to protect that. So I think making it seem like these protesters, all of them, they have, you did say that you don't condone that, I guess, looting. Obviously, I don't think anybody really condones that. And I think getting to the issue at hand, as far as social injustice goes, along all lines, that is not something anyone would condone, or at least I don't think so.
Well, I don't condone it, but I see why people are doing it, and that's just personally, I see people why are doing it, and I have some sympathy for rioters because, riots gave gay rights. We had the Stonewall riots. Riots gave farmers working rights. Riots gave rights. And unfortunately, it has to happen. But I wouldn't personally go out and riot because that's just not me. but I see why they chose to do it. They're rioting against social injustice. What Kyle Rittenhouse is doing, I'm sorry, he did not go out there to protect property. He went out there in the intention to kill someone.
So, what would you say then, Greg, about we had the caravan of Trump supporters that went into Portland? One of them also died, so it kind of goes on both sides of people being provoked and ultimately, dying at situations like this. So, what's your response to that?
I don't. Again, if let's say a leftist did the same thing as Kyle Rittenhouse, I would not condone that. I would not. Like, you're murdering someone. No, you just don't do that. Disrupting property, that's something else. You don't die from that. A target is not worth more than a human life. However, when you see cases of domestic terrorism, they're statistically done by far right Trump supporters. You had the Walmart shooter. He was a Trump supporter, had a whole ass manifesto, and he had intentions of being a cop. The Parkland shooter, he had intentions of being a cop. We have all these domestic terrorists who have far right extremist ideals and are Trump supporters. It's a fact. It statistically happens that they're far right extremists.
I was gonna say I don't really think that's fair because, again, like I feel like you can't categorize like Trump supporters or like far right extremists because by the same token, like far left extremists are just as bad. You see like the looting and the rioting, like
yeah, but none of them resulted in a murder like those.
Let him finish.
Sorry.
Well, I mean, can you tell me that not a single murder has happened at a looting or riot? Because the answer is no, then that's exactly my point. Is like, it's just not fair to say like, to demonize the far right without saying like the far left can be just as bad is like my only thing.
Right. Well, the thing that I feel like is what really is the main issue here is that politics is getting in the way of our morality as Americans. Katie, you did not say anything about George Floyd deserving to have a knee on his neck, but you did not at once condemn the actions of the police officer. And yes, you did not say it, but you implied it. And you're trying to justify his actions. And it's not just you. I don't mean to attack you, but that seems to be the conservative type of narrative around these types of incidents. And I feel like really just tugging onto and holding on to that party line is what's causing this divisiveness in America right now. At this time now, really there should be a unifying message that should be given with everything that's just happening within this year, and we have not heard anything like that. In fact, we've heard more polarizing messages from the president. So I really just think at this moment, we really just need to get back to who we are as Americans, and that is good people who do the right things. And of course, we need police officers. Nobody's saying that we don't. But what we need is good police officers. And we also need to start seeing each other as people and as humans and get over the fact that we have different skin pigmentations. Because as we all know, that's not something that we can control. And so I feel like our way of life here in America is sliding slowly towards a more fascist and racist country, even more so than we've already been. But again, a lot of people will label this type of message that I'm giving as anti-American when that's completely the opposite. I think us as Americans need to take pride in who we are, and we need to come together as a nation because right now the world is watching, and I can tell you that it seems to be that we are the laughing stock of the world right now, and it never used to be that way. They used to be envious of our American pride, but now it's a joke. Our country is a running punchline. So I really just think that ultimately we all need to have discussions like we're having now, so we can come together and see eye to eye and see these different viewpoints that we have and discuss it. Because without these conversations and this open dialogue, there's just going to be back and forth bickering at each other, and that's never going to get anywhere.
Okay, so to close out the episode, we're going to bring some awareness to some of the propositions that are going to appear on November's ballot, and we want to relate the propositions to what we talked about regarding this episode, social injustice. So we have Proposition 17, which would restore the right to vote to people convicted of felonies who are on parole.
I think for the most part, I don't really have a problem with it. My only potential concern is that California has like 115,000 inmates. 115,000 in close votes has the potential to influence like something that's like 45-55. Like it has a potential to influence, and I think like that if all prisoners, for example, have like a certain interest in a topic that will push an agenda for them, then I think it could impact a swing.
Next is Proposition 18, which would allow 17-year-olds who will be 18 at the time of the next general election to vote in primaries and special elections.
I think that's great because, at 17, I was still politically active. And I mean, yeah, it wouldn't let the 17-year-old vote in the general, but when I was 17 and I couldn't vote in 2016, I was angry. I was very, very angry. And I feel like for those 17-year-olds who might feel the same way, I feel like it would give them a chance to actually practice their political freedom.
All right, and the final proposition is Prop 25, and it would replace the cash bail system with risk assessment for suspects awaiting trial.
Right, and I feel very strongly about this proposition. I do think that they should replace the cash bail system, and I think I may be the only one on this panel who has personal experience with the bail system. So I can just say that Lady Justice is blind. Okay, the scales are supposed to be balanced, and it seems to be that the scales are tipped in the favor of those who have money and that are able to purchase their way out of jail while they're waiting for their day in court, which is very, I feel like, unfair, because if you are a rich bajillionaire, you are able to quickly gather those funds to pay your bail, whereas if you're somebody from a disadvantaged community, you end up having to put up mom's house, or you have to make a deal with Aladdin bail bonds to pay a portion of your bail. So it's a disadvantage, I feel like, for poor individuals. And I really think it's a good idea, and I'm glad that California at least put it on the ballot this year. I hope it passes.
All right, and that's it. Thank you for listening to Digestible Discourse with us. We'll cover more propositions in our next episode. I'm Monica Inouye. See you next episode.
Bye.